Let's say you walk into your local store to buy a new phone. Last year it cost $699. This year it's $799. No major upgrades, no new features, just more expensive. You ask the clerk why and they say, it's because of tariffs. You nod politely, but deep down you're thinking, what does that even mean? Most people hear the word tariff and tune out. It sounds like something only economists or politicians talk about. But here's the truth, tariffs affect everything. What you buy, how much you pay, and how far your money really goes. Whether it's your groceries, clothes, electronics, or even your next car, tariffs shape your wallet more than you realize. In this video, I want to walk you through what tariffs actually are, how they work, and why American consumers always end up footing the bill, even when the policy sounds like it's aimed at protecting American jobs or punishing foreign competitors. Before we go too deep, let me just say, if you care about your money and want to understand how global events trickle down to your everyday life, go ahead and subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you're always up to speed. Now let's break this down. A tariff is just a tax. That's it. It's a tax placed on goods that are imported from other countries. For example, if the US government places a 25% tariff on steel from China, that means any company in America buying Chinese steel has to pay 25% more for it. The idea sounds good on paper, make foreign goods more expensive so American companies become more competitive. Bring back jobs, protect local industries, keep factories running. Politicians love this message, especially during election years. It sounds patriotic, it sounds strong. But here's where reality kicks in. Let's go back to that steel example. When a US company pays more for Chinese steel, what do? They don't just eat the cost, they pass it on. To who? To you, the consumer, the buyer, the average person trying to build a home, buy a car, or even install a new fridge. It starts with a company, but it always ends with us. Tariffs might sound like a punishment for other countries, but in practice, they're a tax on Americans. And that's a key truth many people miss. Let me give you a real-world example. Back in 2018, the Trump administration launched a major wave of tariffs against China, on everything from machinery to electronics to consumer goods. China responded with its own set of tariffs. What followed was a full-blown trade war. Prices rose, markets shook, companies scrambled to move supply chains, but consumers? We didn't have that luxury. We paid more. I remember talking to a small business owner. He ran an appliance store in Texas. He told me that his profit margins were already tight, and when the tariffs hit, his suppliers raised prices by 15%. He had two choices, raise prices on customers or cut his staff. He ended up doing both. Multiply that by thousands of stores, thousands of workers, millions of families. That's the ripple effect tariffs create. Now, here's where I want you to start thinking differently. Tariffs don't happen in a vacuum. When prices go up, spending habits change. When spending habits change, the economy slows down. When the economy slows down, companies stop hiring, or they let people go. And when that happens, we're told to tighten our belts. All because of a policy that was supposed to help the American worker. It's a complicated game, and the sad part is, most people don't even know they're part of it. Later in this series, we're going to look at how corporations adapt, how politicians sell these ideas, and how countries like China, Mexico, and even Canada respond strategically. I want you to remember this. Every time you hear the word tariff, replace it in your mind with tax on me. Because that's the real cost of tariffs. It's not paid by China, it's not paid by Mexico, it's not paid by overseas companies. It's paid by Americans at the checkout line, at the gas station, and on their monthly bills. Next, I'll take you behind the curtain, how corporations respond to tariffs, how they quietly shift production, and why the biggest players often win no matter what. But before we move forward, if you're learning something new here, subscribe now and turn on that bell. Because these are the financial truths most people never talk about, but they should. So now that we've peeled back the first layer, what tariffs are and how they affect prices, let's go deeper. Let's talk about how the biggest corporations in the world respond to tariffs, and why they rarely feel the pain the way small businesses or everyday consumers do. Let me be clear. Big companies don't like tariffs, but they're prepared for them. Here's why. When you're running a global corporation like Apple, Nike, or Walmart, you don't rely on one country for your entire supply chain. You're already working with manufacturers in China, India, Vietnam, Mexico, and dozens of other locations. If tariffs make imports from one country more expensive, you shift production. It's not cheap, it's not easy, but it's doable. And for these companies, it's survivable. Now let me tell you a story that makes this real. When the Trump administration imposed tariffs on Chinese electronics and components, Apple faced a challenge. iPhones were being assembled in China. If they continued, the cost of every iPhone could go up by $100 or more. So what did Apple do? They started moving production. Not all of it, but enough to keep things under control. They expanded into India. They negotiated with the US government for exemptions. They played the long game because that's what smart corporations do. But you know who can't play that game? Small and mid-sized businesses. If you run a company with 20 employees and rely on one supplier in China, you don't have the money or time to rebuild your supply chain in another country. You can't absorb a 25% increase in cost. You can't afford to renegotiate contracts overnight. So you do what most businesses are forced to do. You raise prices or cut staff or both, and this creates an unfair dynamic. Tariffs are supposed to protect American businesses, but in practice, they protect the biggest businesses, the ones that already have the resources to adjust, negotiate, or move operations overseas. The small shops, the family-owned brands, the startups, they're left holding the bill. Now, here's something most people don't realize. When a company like Walmart faces a tariff, it doesn't panic. It leans on its suppliers. It demands they eat the cost or find cheaper materials. And if that doesn't work, Walmart just raises prices, quietly, over time, in a way you barely notice. Suddenly that $8 shirt is now $9.47. That $300 TV is now $319. You won't protest, you'll just pay it, because the increase is small. But over millions of customers, it adds up to billions in extra revenue. And this is why large companies don't fear tariffs the way politicians make it sound. They've built pricing flexibility into their models. They've trained their customers to accept small, consistent price hikes. Let's take another example, Harley-Davidson. When tariffs were introduced on steel and aluminum, Harley-Davidson announced it would move some production overseas to avoid EU retaliatory tariffs. It wasn't about patriotism, it was about survival. They knew they couldn't stay competitive if their bikes became 10 to 15% more expensive in Europe. Now think about that. An iconic American brand known for its Made in America image moving production abroad, not because it wanted to, but because tariffs forced its hand. That's the irony. The very policy meant to protect American jobs sometimes pushes companies to move jobs out of the country, because it's cheaper, faster, and less risky than waiting for political dust to settle. And this isn't just about goods. It's about services too. US tech companies that rely on international data centers, software engineers, or hardware manufacturers also feel the pinch. When tariffs affect key components, those extra costs get passed down. Through cloud subscriptions, app fees, licensing, and more. Again, consumers pay, even when you don't realize it. So here's the truth most people don't hear on the news. Tariffs don't stop globalization. They just change how the game is played. Big players adapt, they always have. The ones who suffer most, small businesses, regular employees, everyday families who don't get exemptions, tax breaks, or insider information. So how do you protect yourself? That's what we'll talk about next. How consumers can recognize the warning signs, prepare for price changes, and make smarter money decisions during trade tensions. You might not track the news every time a new tariff is announced. You're busy, most of us are. But even if you're not paying attention, tariffs find a way into your life, and your budget. They don't knock loudly at the front door, they creep in, quietly, through small price increases, through delays in product restocks, through shrinkflation, where companies reduce the size of a product instead of increasing the price. That box of cereal used to weigh 18 ounces, now it's 15, and the price? Still the same. That's how tariffs show up in your pantry. Let's go back a few years. During the peak of the US.-China trade war, nearly every major retailer, Walmart, Target, Best Buy, issued statements warning that consumer prices were going up. They didn't say it loudly, but they knew. Their supply chains were affected, their contracts were renegotiated, and you, the shopper, became the final payer. And it wasn't just electronics or clothing, it was furniture, kitchen appliances, tools, even toys. There was a study conducted by the New York Federal Reserve that found that by the end of 2019, the average American household was paying about $831 more per year due to tariffs. That's not small change, that's groceries for a month. That's a car payment, that's the difference between staying on budget and slipping into credit card debt. So let's talk about how you can prepare. First, recognize the red flags. When you see headlines about tariffs, especially on categories like steel, aluminum, semiconductors, or consumer goods, pay attention. Even if it sounds far away, those materials are in almost everything, from your laptop to your fridge to your car. Second, don't wait for prices to hit. Get proactive. If you know tariffs are coming, especially on tech or household essentials, plan ahead. If there's something you need in the next 6 months, buy it before prices adjust. Don't panic buy, but be smart. Third, track your spending more carefully during trade uncertainty. Price hikes often happen gradually. One week it's 50 cents, next week it's $1. Over time it drains your budget. This is where a good money tracking app comes in handy, or even a simple spreadsheet. The goal is awareness. If you're watching closely, you'll start seeing the patterns. Fourth, think long-term with your purchases. Buy quality over quantity. If tariffs raise the price of cheap items by 20%, it may be better to spend a little more upfront on something durable. One good appliance that lasts 8 years is better than 2 replacements that break down after 3. Now let me be clear, I'm not saying you can avoid the impact of tariffs completely, that would be unrealistic. But you can minimize the damage, you can stop being blindsided, and if you're someone who's building a business, especially an e-commerce or product-based one, be even more alert. Check where your products come from. See which components are vulnerable to trade policy. Diversify your suppliers if you can. Let me share a quick story. A friend of mine sells LED lighting online. When the 2019 tariffs hit, his supplier in China raised prices by 25%. At first he tried to pass that cost on to customers, but his sales dropped. So he looked for another option. He found a Vietnamese supplier. The quality was similar. The price was a little higher, but it wasn't hit by the tariffs. He survived, and now he has 2 sources instead of 1. That's a smart move. So what should the average person take away from all of this? Simple. Tariffs are never just about foreign governments, they're about your money, your choices, your future. And the sooner you start watching how trade policy affects your personal economy, the sooner you'll be ahead of the curve. Finally, we're going to talk about why these policies continue, even when they hurt consumers, and what the alternatives might be if we actually want fairer trade and stronger economies. But before we move on, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell. If you've learned something new today, stay with me, because this next part is going to explain why this keeps happening, and who really benefits. So, we've covered how tariffs work, how corporations adapt, and how you can protect your wallet. But there's still a big question left. If tariffs hurt consumers, if they raise prices, if they slow down parts of the economy, why do governments keep using them? Why does the cycle keep repeating? Let's be honest, tariffs are political tools. They sound strong, they look decisive, and in the short term they create headlines that make leaders look like they're standing up for their country. Think about this. When a president stands at a podium and says, "We're putting America first," it plays well, people cheer, and when they say, "We're making China pay," it feels like justice. But we know now, that's not what actually happens. China doesn't write a check to cover tariffs. American companies do, and American consumers cover the rest. Tariffs are easy to sell because they're hard to see. Unlike income taxes or property taxes, you don't get a bill in the mail that says tariff charges. But they're there. At the gas pump, in the grocery aisle, on your Amazon receipt, silent taxes. And the majority of people never connect the dots. That's part of the design. Now let's talk about who wins. Big corporations, as we've discussed, often find ways around tariffs. They absorb costs, raise prices, or shift supply chains. If they have enough market share, they actually benefit. Smaller competitors fold, and they gain more control. But there's another group that wins: governments. Tariffs generate revenue. Every time a foreign product enters the country and is taxed, that money goes to the government. It adds to the treasury. So while politicians are saying we're protecting jobs, they're also collecting billions in tariff income. During the 2018 to 2019 trade war, the US collected over $70 billion in tariffs. That's a lot of money. But again, not paid by China, paid by Americans. And here's the twist. Some of that money was used to subsidize American farmers who were hurt by the trade war. So think about that. Tariffs raised prices on goods. That money went to the government. Then the government used that money to support the people hurt by the policy. It's a loop, a reactive cycle. And it's happening with your dollars. Now, to be fair, not everyone agrees that tariffs are bad. Some argue they're necessary to protect critical industries, to push back against unfair trade practices, to level the playing field. And there's truth in that, when used wisely. But that's not often the case. In today's world, tariffs are rarely precision tools. They're blunt instruments. They target entire categories, electronics, steel, agriculture, without always considering the ripple effect. And in a global economy where nearly every product has components from multiple countries, the impact is rarely clean. Let's use the example of washing machines. In 2018, tariffs were placed on imported washing machines to protect US manufacturers. What happened? Prices of washing machines went up by 12%, but that wasn't all. Dryers, which weren't even tariffed, also went up by 8%. Why? Because retailers sold them in pairs, consumers paid more, manufacturers smiled, and the government collected its cut. This kind of outcome isn't unusual, it's routine. So now let's ask the final question. What's the alternative? How do we fix this? First, we need more transparency. If you're going to use tariffs, explain how they affect prices. Educate the public. Don't pretend it's a free punishment for foreign countries. Be real. Second, focus on negotiation and long-term trade agreements. When the US pulls out of global trade deals or enacts tariffs without warning, it creates chaos. Business hates chaos. Markets hate chaos. Consumers end up paying for that chaos. Third, invest in local competitiveness, not just with tariffs, but with policy. Education, innovation, fair wages, infrastructure. If we want American companies to win, we need to help them compete, not just shield them. And finally, we need consumers to understand their power. That's where you come in. Every time you choose where to shop, what to support, and what to pay attention to, you're shaping the economy. You might not see it immediately, but over time, your choices matter. So, Curtis here, and if you've stuck with me through the video, I just want to say thank you. These topics aren't easy and they don't come with quick fixes, but understanding them, that's the first step toward making better decisions for your money, your family, and your future. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you stay informed. We talk about these things often here: real money, real systems, and the truth behind the headlines. Because the world doesn't just run on sound bites, it runs on systems. And the more you understand, the better you'll do. Thanks for watching. Stay smart, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next one.